It was late November 2022 in Portland, Oregon, and I had just finished a closing shift at the restaurant I worked at. It was past midnight, and the cold had sunk into my bones. I remember standing outside the back entrance, wrapped in my oversized jacket, watching my breath fog in the air as I waited for my Uber. My phone buzzed. Driver arriving in 3 minutes. His name was Simon, a silver Toyota Corolla. Everything looked fine. The car pulled up right on time. The windows were tinted darker than usual, but I didn't think much of it. I opened the back door, slid in, and quickly shut it against the cold. The interior smelled like pine-scented cleaner. Simon didn't say anything, just tapped the app to begin the ride. He had a black hoodie pulled over his head, and I could only see part of his face in the glow of the dashboard. We started driving, but something felt off almost immediately. He didn't take the usual route home. I know the city well enough, and he was heading away from my neighborhood. I leaned forward and asked if the GPS had rerouted. No response. I repeated myself, louder this time, and that's when he finally spoke. His voice was flat, mechanical, like he was reciting something from memory. He said, "We're taking a safer route tonight. Too many accidents on Burnside." I didn't know what to say. He didn't sound angry or threatening, just wrong, like a pre-recorded voice. I pulled out my phone to check the app, but weirdly the ride had ended. It said trip completed. My destination was still 15 minutes away, but the app showed I was already there. I told him to stop the car. His hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, but he didn't say anything. He just kept driving. I remember my heartbeat getting louder in my ears as I realized I had no way to contact Uber mid-ride. I unlocked my phone and tried to call 911, but there was no signal, 0 bars. And I wasn't in some rural back road. I was in the middle of the city. That's when I knew something was deeply, deeply wrong. I quietly turned on my camera and started recording. I had no idea what else to do. I pointed it at the dashboard, catching his face in the rearview mirror. That's when I noticed something chilling. His eyes didn't reflect the light. Not in the normal way. They looked completely black, like two voids. I've never seen anything like it. I whispered a message into the camera just in case I didn't make it out. Then I reached for the door handle, ready to jump at the next stoplight. But we never hit a red light. It was like the city had cleared a path for him. Every light turned green as we approached. The car glided through empty intersections, silent and smooth. I saw buildings I didn't recognize, even though I've lived in Portland my whole life. It felt like we had slipped into some other version of the city. Familiar yet distorted. Then he spoke again, same mechanical voice. "You shouldn't have looked in the mirror." That's all he said. I hadn't looked in the rearview mirror. Not until he said that. I glanced up, and what I saw still gives me nightmares. It wasn't me staring back. It was something that looked like me, but its eyes were rolled back, and its mouth was stretched into a grin so wide it looked torn at the corners. My reflection blinked. I didn't. I screamed and lunged for the door handle again. This time it opened. The car had slowed slightly to make a turn, and I took the chance. Throwing myself onto the sidewalk, I hit the ground hard, bruising my side, but I scrambled to my feet and ran into the nearest lit building, a 24-hour laundromat. I turned around expecting to see the car speeding off, but it was gone. No tire marks, no taillights disappearing into the night. It was like it had never been there. I collapsed onto one of the plastic chairs inside, trembling. The clerk behind the counter looked up and asked if I was okay. I just nodded and told him I needed to charge my phone. When I finally got a signal back, the recording I made was gone. Not corrupted, just gone, as if it had never been saved. I checked my Uber history. There was no record of any ride that night. My account had no completed trips since 2 days before. I even contacted Uber support, and they said no driver named Simon with that car ever existed on the platform. For a while I thought maybe I imagined it, that the exhaustion, the cold, maybe even a dream had warped my sense of reality. But then, 2 weeks later, a letter showed up in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, a shot of me in the back seat of a silver Toyota Corolla, mouth wide open in mid-scream, and I wasn't holding the camera. It was a cold February night in 2023, and I had just finished a long shift at the hospital in Flagstaff, Arizona. I was too exhausted to drive home, so I requested an Uber to get back to my apartment, which was about 20 minutes away. The app matched me with a driver named Jeremy, 4.9 stars, silver sedan, clean record. Everything seemed normal. When the car pulled up, I slid into the back seat and immediately noticed the warmth. Not just heat from the vents, but something suffocating, like the inside of a sealed container. Jeremy didn't say much, just nodded, and we started moving. His face was mostly hidden by a ball cap pulled low and the shadows from the streetlights. I wasn't in the mood to talk, so I stared out the window, letting the darkness rush past. We took the usual route at first, but about 5 minutes in, the car veered onto a side road I didn't recognize. I sat up straighter and asked if there was a detour. Jeremy didn't answer. I leaned forward and asked again. Still nothing. The car kept moving deeper into a wooded area I'd never seen before, even though I'd lived in Flagstaff for 4 years. I opened the app to check the route, but suddenly my phone had no service, not a single bar. I turned to ask Jeremy what was going on, but this time I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The rearview mirror. He wasn't using it, not adjusting it, not glancing at it. It was angled completely downward. I asked him to stop the car, loud and firm. He didn't even flinch. Then the car slowed, not stopped, just slowed, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the passenger seat move. No one was sitting there, but the seat shifted as if someone had just leaned forward. The indentation formed slowly as though some weight was pressing into it. I blinked hard, thinking maybe my mind was playing tricks, but then I heard breathing, not from Jeremy, not from me, something else, wet, shallow, gurgling breaths. I froze. Jeremy didn't react. It was like he couldn't hear it. I pressed the door lock to try and escape, but it was already locked. When I tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. The child safety lock was engaged. I reached for my phone again, desperate to call someone, but the battery had dropped from 45% to 1% in less than a minute. It died in my hand. The car came to a full stop in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. There were no houses, no streetlights, just the engine humming softly and that awful breathing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jeremy turned off the engine and just sat there. I didn't wait. I started pounding on the window, screaming for help, kicking the seat in front of me. Still, no reaction from him. He just kept staring ahead. Then he whispered something, not to me, to the air. Or maybe to whatever was in the passenger seat. "She's ready." Those 2 words froze me solid. I started sobbing, begging to be let out, promising money, anything, and that's when the passenger door opened. But still, no one was there. The seatbelt stretched outward like it was being pulled, even though no hand touched it. I heard it click into place and then tighten like it was restraining something. Jeremy started driving again. I couldn't move. My body refused to cooperate. Every instinct told me to fight, to scream, to smash the window. But I sat there in absolute terror, watching that invisible seatbelt tighten further as though whatever was sitting there was now being secured. Then, slowly, I felt something press against my shoulder. Cold, weightless, but definitely there. A presence. Just before I completely lost it, headlights appeared behind us, a ranger's truck flashing red and blue. Jeremy cursed under his breath and pulled over. The moment we stopped, I reached across the seat, unlocked the door, and threw myself onto the dirt road, screaming for help. The ranger got out and rushed over. I was sobbing, hyperventilating, begging him to get me away from that car. When he turned to speak to Jeremy, the driver's seat was empty. No Jeremy, just the keys still in the ignition and the passenger seat belt unbuckled and dangling loose. They searched the woods, ran the plates, tried tracking the app data, but the Uber ride never registered on my account history. Jeremy's name didn't exist in their system. I was told I might have mixed up the car. That maybe I hallucinated the entire thing due to stress, but that can't be because in my coat pocket when I got home, I found something I didn't put there, a parking stub, faded but dated from 2004. And on the back, written in shaky red ink, "Thanks for the ride." In October 2022, I was visiting a friend in Portland, Oregon. We'd spent the evening catching up over dinner, and by the time I requested an Uber to get back to my Airbnb, it was past 11 p.m. The air was cool, the streets were quiet, and I remember checking the license plate as the black Toyota Camry pulled up. Everything matched the app. The driver's name was Carl. 5 stars, nearly 1,200 rides. I got in. Carl greeted me with a simple nod. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror for just a second before he pulled away from the curb. The inside of the car smelled like vanilla and leather, a little too clean, like it had been scrubbed top to bottom not long ago. But I was tired and not in the mood to overthink. I settled into the seat and scrolled through my phone. We drove for about 10 minutes before I realized we weren't heading in the direction of my Airbnb. I knew the area well enough to notice we'd skipped a main turn and were now winding through less familiar streets. I asked if we were taking a different route. Carl didn't answer. I sat up straighter, watching the streetlights thin out until there were only occasional flickers of orange light casting shadows across the dashboard. My phone, for some reason, had gone from full signal to no service. I checked the Uber app. It still showed me on a trip, but the route line was gone. The map had frozen. That's when Carl spoke for the first time. His voice was low, almost reluctant. He said, "It's faster this way." It wasn't. I knew that. I told him to just take me back to the original route. He didn't acknowledge me. His knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. That's when I noticed his hands were shaking, subtly, but definitely trembling. We continued down a narrow back road that led us into what looked like an industrial area. Fewer lights, fewer signs of life. I started to panic. I asked him to pull over, to let me out, but he didn't respond. His stare was fixed ahead, blank, like he was driving on autopilot. I unbuckled my seatbelt and tried the door handle. It was locked. The manual lock was gone, replaced by a smooth panel. When I leaned forward to try and reach the driver's lock controls, he slammed the brakes. Hard. I hit the back of the passenger seat with my shoulder. He turned to face me. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse, confused, like he didn't know where he was or how he got there. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm not supposed to be here." I didn't know what to say. I asked him again, more forcefully, to let me out. He blinked rapidly, then turned back to the wheel and kept driving. I was shaking now, heart pounding, thinking through my options. My phone still showed no signal. No emergency call would go through. Then, as we took another left down a pitch-dark street, I saw something ahead. A white shape, human-sized, standing motionless in the middle of the road. Carl didn't slow down. I screamed for him to stop, to look, but he kept going straight. I braced for impact. At the last second, the car passed right through it. The white figure didn't move, didn't flinch, because it wasn't solid. It was like a projection of a person, blurred at the edges and colder than the air around it. My breath fogged the window instantly as we passed it. Carl muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make it out, just a series of frantic whispers. Then the car came to a halt in an open gravel lot with no lights and no buildings, just fog and shadows. Without a word, he opened his door and got out. I watched him walk around the front of the car and stand by the passenger door like he was waiting for someone to exit. I stared in horror as the passenger door slowly creaked open by itself. The seat inside compressed, like someone was sitting down. Again, no one was there. Carl shut the door as if someone had entered. Then he walked back to his seat, got in, and began driving again. My brain was short-circuiting. I didn't understand what I was witnessing. I sat frozen, watching that empty seat beside him as if it truly wasn't empty at all. The rest of the ride was dead silent. We drove for what felt like an hour, but when I looked at my watch, only 5 minutes had passed. My surroundings felt warped, like we were suspended in a bubble separate from time. And then, without warning, we pulled up outside my Airbnb. Carl didn't say a word. I didn't either. I fumbled with the door, it was unlocked now, and jumped out, nearly tripping onto the sidewalk. When I turned to look back, the car was gone, not driving away, just gone, like it had never been there at all. I ran inside and locked every door and window. When I checked my Uber history, there was no record of the ride, no Carl, no trip logged, just a void between the time I left dinner and the moment I returned. The next morning I went to the curb to see if I had imagined it all, but something was there, a small red object lying where the car had stopped. I picked it up. It was an old driver's license, faded, cracked and water-damaged. The photo looked like Carl, but the name was different. And the expiration date, it was from 1997. If these stories sent chills down your spine, imagine what else is out there, lurking in the shadows of reality. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a true tale that just might keep you up tonight.